The room feels colder when he doesn't answer. The glow of your phone fades into black, reflecting only your face back at you like a fractured mirror. Every second of silence presses against your chest like a weight, reminding you that his attention was never yours to command. You imagine him scrolling past your message without thought, while you sit still, your breath shallow, waiting. The silence cuts sharper than any insult because it feels like proof that you are invisible. But the silence that haunts you most is never his. It is your own. The space where you explain yourself, justify your needs, beg for scraps of reassurance. That endless talking into a void where you try to convince someone that your presence is worth staying for. Every word you spill is like blood from an open vein, feeding a hunger that never satisfies. And somewhere deep down, you already know, the more you explain, the smaller you become. This is where the shadow whispers. In the dark, it tells you the truth you try to deny. Every explanation is a confession of powerlessness. He is not compelled by your reasoning. He is only entertained by your unraveling. The more you justify, the less he feels the need to answer. What binds him is not your words. It is your silence. Carl Jung once said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. The compulsion to explain yourself, to defend your value, is the unconscious wound dragging you back into the same stories. It is the abandoned child begging at the door, the little girl asking why she wasn't chosen. And as long as you keep explaining, you remain trapped in that role. But when you stop, the entire story shifts. Because there is an ancient figure who never explained herself. She walked outside the laws of men, outside the cages of justification. Her name was Lilith. Cast out of Eden for refusing to bow, she carried her shadow not as a curse, but as a weapon. She became the symbol of the woman who owes no one her obedience, and therefore no one her explanation. When you step into her archetype, silence becomes your shield and your fire. Imagine it, you say nothing when he withdraws. No desperate texts, no nervous apologies, no explanations rehearsed in trembling breath. You simply disappear into yourself, into the unbroken rhythm of your own presence. And in that silence, he begins to wonder. His mind fills the void with stories. His certainty fractures. The hollow absence you leave behind becomes louder than all the words you used to spill. That is when obsession begins to grow. Not because you explained, but because you didn't. There is a dangerous truth here. Men are not undone by your reasoning. They are undone by the weight of your absence. The click of your heels leaving the room echoes longer than the hours you spent pleading. The hollow silence after your laughter vanishes shakes him more than any confrontation. He can dismiss your words. He cannot dismiss the emptiness you leave. And yet silence is not easy. To hold it is to feel every tremor in your own body, every impulse to fill the void, every old wound screaming to be heard. To stay silent is to face the shadow directly, the fear that without explanation you will be abandoned forever. But here is the paradox. The very act of holding silence proves you are no longer that abandoned child. You become the woman who does not beg, who does not chase, who does not collapse. Jung would call this individuation, the moment when the fragmented pieces of you are no longer ruled by fear, but integrated into wholeness. The shadow child inside you will cry for release, but you must hold her hand through the silence, because beyond it lies a power she has never known, a power that does not come from being understood, but from being unshakably present. Lilith does not explain because she does not need to. She knows that her existence is enough. Her silence is not emptiness. It is the sound of boundaries, the weight of self-respect, the fire of untamed freedom. To embody her is to let the silence speak for you. To walk into a room without asking permission to be there. To let every gaze turn because your presence is undeniable, even when your mouth says nothing. And still, this power terrifies you, because you know what happens when you hold it. His eyes will change. The man who once ignored your messages will now wait for yours. The one who dismissed you will begin to study your silence, searching for cracks, desperate to know what you are thinking. He will feel the cold marble of distance under his palms, the trembling breath of uncertainty in his chest, and he will realize he no longer owns your story. But the deeper danger is not in how he reacts. It is in how silence reshapes you. It forces you to see that your worth was never negotiable, that you are not the echo of someone else's attention, but the source of your own fire. Silence teaches you to stop performing for scraps, to stop explaining to those who never intended to listen. And once you learn this, you cannot unlearn it. You cannot return to the woman who begged to be understood. You become the woman who doesn't explain, who doesn't bow, who carries the shadow like a crown, but to step into her fully requires one final act of surrender, not to him, not to love, but to the silence itself. And that is the most dangerous truth of all. The crimson silk slips from your chair as you rise, leaving only the hollow echo of your heels in the corridor. And somewhere in the silence behind you, his voice finally breaks, whispering your name into the void you left behind. But you do not turn back. The echo of your name is no longer a chain. It is a ghost, fading into the chiaroscuro between past and present. You walk forward, and for the first time, you feel the weight of silence not as punishment, but as armor. Each step is a declaration that you no longer beg for recognition. You embody the myth the world tried to bury, the woman who answers to no one. He feels the emptiness like cold sweat against his skin. In the quiet hours when the glow of his screen offers no reply, his mind twists upon itself. He replays every scene, your laughter, the weight of your gaze, the crimson dress that clung to your body the night he thought he had you fully. Now it is absence that haunts him, the absence that whispers louder than your presence ever did. And with each hour of silence, he learns what obsession truly is. You may not realize it, but silence is the most provocative language you can speak. It has the power of projection. When you do not explain, he fills the void with his own insecurities, his own fantasies, his own hunger. Every unanswered text becomes a mirror, showing him his own inadequacy. Every withheld word becomes a question he cannot escape. And suddenly, the one who dismissed you finds himself enslaved by the silence he once imposed upon you. Yet this is not just about him. This is about you standing in the ruins of your old patterns, realizing you no longer crumble where you once fell. Jung wrote that the shadow is not evil, it is simply that which we have refused to see. And what you have refused to see is that your endless explanations were never love. They were survival. They were the trembling child in you trying to keep abandonment at bay. But survival is not sovereignty. And now, you are ready to step beyond survival. In the myth, Lilith was not killed. She was demonized, cast as a temptress, a succubus, a destroyer. Why? Because nothing terrifies a man or a society more than a woman who cannot be controlled by shame. To never explain is to never allow the world to define you through guilt or justification. It is to say, I am, and I require no permission to be. That is why her name is whispered with fear, and why her power has endured through centuries of suppression. Imagine this power in your own life. You walk into the dinner where he once left an empty chair across from you, but now you sit without apology, without waiting for him to arrive. You order what you desire, you savor every bite, you laugh without needing an audience. The chair across from you is no longer a wound, it is a monument, proof that your life does not pause for anyone's absence. The silence across the table is not loneliness, it is sovereignty. This is the transformation. When the wound of abandonment becomes the throne of autonomy, when the silence that once crushed you becomes the silence that shields you, you no longer wait by the phone, trembling at the thought of rejection. Instead, you let the phone lie cold and untouched because your presence is not confined to glowing screens. It fills every room you enter. It radiates from you like fire under the skin, and it cannot be ignored. But do not mistake this for indifference. Silence is not apathy, it is intensity restrained. It is the coiled serpent beneath the marble floor, the storm waiting behind still air. When you choose silence, you choose the discipline of power. You choose to let your actions, your presence, your gaze, speak louder than explanations ever could. And in doing so, you step into the rarest form of magnetism, mystery. Mystery is not about hiding who you are. It is about refusing to cheapen your soul through overexposure. It is about letting others earn the right to understand you, rather than handing them the map to your heart before they've proven their worth. When you hold back, you do not create distance, you create gravity. The unseen becomes irresistible. The unknown becomes unforgettable. This is the siren's gift, the shadow queen's crown, the high priestess's veil, and it is yours the moment you stop explaining. Still, the world will demand your compliance. It will try to shame you for being difficult, cold, unavailable. But these are not insults. They are proof that you have broken the mold, that you no longer bend under the gaze of others. Each accusation becomes a mirror of their fear, not your failing. And when you realize this, their words lose all power. The silence inside you grows unshakable. But here lies the deepest paradox. Silence not only frees you from them, it forces you to hear yourself. And sometimes that voice is the hardest to face. In the midnight hours, when the room is dark and the fractured mirror shows only your eyes, silence will strip away every mask. It will confront you with the raw truth of who you are beneath the roles, beneath the performances. And what you find there will either terrify you or liberate you. The question is, are you ready to face what your own silence reveals? The silence within you is not empty. It is a cavern echoing with all the voices you once silenced just to be loved. The child's plea, the teenager's rage, the woman's despair, they resurface when your mouth finally closes. At first, it feels unbearable, as though the quiet might shatter you. But if you dare to stay with it, you will discover something extraordinary. The voice that rises is not begging, not apologizing, not explaining. It is commanding. This is where shadow work begins. Jung taught that the shadow is not what we wish to destroy, but what we must integrate. The shame that once forced you to over-explain is not an enemy. It is the doorway. It holds the raw power of a self that never learned to beg, that never bowed to fear. When you sit in silence and allow the shadow to speak, you realize it was never weakness. It was strength hidden under the rubble of rejection. Your silence reveals the archetype that has been waiting all along. Not the obedient Eve, not the fragile maiden, but Lilith, the one who walked away rather than bend. She whispers through the hollow corridors of your being, stop explaining, stop pleading, stop betraying yourself for crumbs. Every time you listen, you reclaim another fragment of yourself. And the more you embody her, the more magnetic you become, not because you chase, but because you withdraw. Men sense it immediately. They feel the shift in your energy like the weight of a gaze across a crowded room. It unsettles them. They can no longer predict you, no longer control you with silence or neglect. The same man who once dismissed your words now trembles when you offer none. His thoughts spiral in the void, each unanswered question turning into obsession. He imagines you with others. He dreams of the sound of your heels. He replays the heat of your body pressed against crimson silk. He no longer touches. Your silence becomes his torment. And still, you do not break. You hold it like a priestess holding ritual fire, knowing one spark could destroy or illuminate. Your discipline is what sets you apart. Anyone can shout, explain, beg. Few can master the art of saying nothing. And those who do, they become unforgettable, because silence is not passive, it is the sharpest blade in your arsenal. Picture the moment. He finally reaches out, voice cracking in desperation, words tumbling to fill the void you left. He demands answers, pleads for clarity, insists on explanations. But you remain calm, unshaken, the weight of marble beneath his trembling hands. Maybe you say nothing at all. Maybe you offer only a gaze, a half smile, a whisper that cuts deeper than paragraphs. He realizes too late that the power has shifted, that the silence which once imprisoned you now imprisons him. But this is not just about men. This is about every dynamic in your life that tried to bind you. Friends who took your loyalty for granted, family who demanded compliance, workplaces that fed on your endless justifications. The moment you stop explaining, the game ends. No one can play with a woman who refuses to sit at the table of their approval. No one can drain the energy of a woman whose silence is stronger than their judgment. This is why silence is dangerous, because it ends cycles that were never meant to sustain you. There is a reason why archetypes endure. The siren, the shadow queen, the high priestess, they all embody the same principle. They speak less, but their presence speaks endlessly. Their mystery, their restraint, their refusal to hand over their power through words makes them unforgettable. And you too can wear this crown. You already feel its weight when you choose not to explain, when you let others wrestle with their own discomfort rather than rushing to ease it. That discomfort is their mirror, not yours to carry. But silence is not without risk. It will cost you. It may strip away people who cannot handle their own reflection. It may unsettle relationships that depended on your endless explanations. It may even leave you standing alone in rooms that once felt warm. And in those moments, the temptation will be fierce, to break, to explain, to soften the silence with words. But if you endure, if you hold steady, you will emerge forged, untouchable, radiant. And here lies the heart of individuation. You do not destroy your shadow, you become me whole by embracing it. Silence is not about denying your voice, but about reclaiming the choice of when and how to use it. It is about knowing that your value does not rise and fall on the tides of someone else's recognition. That even when you say nothing, you are everything. But beware, when you master silence, you awaken something far greater than personal freedom. You awaken the archetypal energy of Lilith herself. And once she moves through you, there is no returning to the woman who begged. There is no softening back into obedience. The world will feel your presence differently, and you must be ready to bear the consequences of such dangerous power. Because when a woman never explains herself, she doesn't just change her relationships. She changes the balance of the entire room. And when you finally step into that silence, the air itself bends around you. Conversations shift, eyes linger, and the ones who once underestimated you feel a weight they cannot name. It is not the sharpness of your tongue that unsettles them. It is the abyss of your restraint. When you do not explain, you leave them in darkness, forced to project their fears, their desires, their judgments onto the silence you hold. And in that silence, they realize something unbearable. They do not control you. This is where power becomes magnetic, because mystery is gravity. The less you reveal, the more they lean in. The less you justify, the more they crave understanding. What they once took for granted now becomes a labyrinth they cannot escape. Every step they take toward you feels like a descent into something deeper, something primal. And though they may resist, though they may mock or dismiss, they always return, because silence pulls harder than words. But there is also a danger here. Silence, like fire, must be wielded with precision. Too much and it can consume intimacy. Too little and its magic fades. To master silence is to dance between shadow and light, between withholding and offering. It is to understand that silence is not the absence of communication. It is the highest form of it. It tells the world, I will not perform for your comfort. I will not dilute myself to be palatable. If you wish to know me, you must step into the unknown. This is the truth most never dare to live, because silence requires trust, not in others but in yourself. Trust that even if no one understands, you remain whole. Trust that even if he never calls, you remain desired. Trust that even if the world misunderstands you, you remain undeniable. Without that trust, silence feels like death. With it, silence becomes resurrection. And in this resurrection, you find yourself face to face with Lilith again. Her voice is not loud, but it pierces through you like a blade. You were not born to explain. You were not born to kneel. You were born to burn. You feel her in the weight of your gaze, in the echo of your heels across marble floors, in the stillness that makes men stammer. She does not guide you with gentle hands. She throws you into fire and demands you rise. And you do. Consider this. When you embody silence, you are no longer reactive. You no longer bend every time someone pulls away, no longer collapse when faced with disapproval. Instead, you stand still, letting the storm break against you. You let others reveal themselves while you reveal nothing. Their words betray their fears. Their accusations betray their insecurities. Their silence betrays their obsession. And through it all, you remain composed, veiled, unshakable. This is why men fear women who do not explain. Because without explanation, they cannot control the narrative. They cannot reduce you to their version of events. They cannot dismiss you with logic, because you never played their game. Your silence denies them entry into your inner world, forcing them to face themselves instead. And that is a confrontation most cannot endure. But silence does more than unsettle others. It awakens a new intimacy with yourself. You begin to savor your own company, the way the night air feels on your skin, the way music vibrates through your body, the way your laughter echoes in empty rooms. You no longer rush to share every thought, every feeling. You let them ripen inside you, feeding your own fire. And slowly, the desperate need for external validation fades, replaced by an inner knowing that cannot be shaken. Yet the more you embody this, the more the world will try to test you. Some will accuse you of arrogance. Others will punish you with withdrawal. Some will beg you to break the silence, to explain, to soften. But each time you hold steady, you grow stronger. You learn that their discomfort is not yours to carry. You learn that your silence is not cruelty, it is clarity. It separates those who can stand in your fire from those who cannot. And in the end, silence does something even words never could. It transforms you into a mirror. Everyone who encounters you will see only what they are. Easy to see. Some will see danger. Some will see allure. Some will see rejection. Some will see divinity. But all will feel the weight of your presence, and none will forget it. Still, the final trial remains. To wield silence not only with men, not only with the world, but with yourself. To sit in the hollow dark and hear the whispers of your own depths. To face the mirror without breaking it. Because until you do, the silence will always carry an edge of fear. But when you finally embrace it fully, without resistance, silence becomes not a weapon, but a crown. And as you lift that crown, the world itself seems to pause, waiting to see what you will become without the weight of explanation. The crown does not glitter, it burns. It is forged from every time you were ignored, every time you were silenced, every time your voice was twisted into something small. To wear it is to accept that you will never again be what they wanted you to be. You will never again kneel at the altar of approval. And though it feels heavy at first, it reshapes your spine until you stand straighter, taller, untouchable. This is where individuation reveals its sharpest truth. Freedom comes with exile. Lilith was cast out of paradise, not because she was unworthy, but because she refused to bow. And so will you be cast out of certain circles, certain dynamics, certain relationships. But exile is not loss, it is liberation. It is the silence of the desert, the place where you finally hear your own voice unbroken. The place where no one can tell you who to be, because no one dares to follow you there. The irony is that the more you stand in this exile, the more others will be drawn to you. The ones who once dismissed you will begin to circle back, sensing the shift they cannot explain. They will test the edges of your silence, trying to pull words from your lips. Some will do it with anger, some with charm, some with desperation. But all will fail unless they have earned the right to enter your inner world. And that is the difference. You no longer give yourself away for free. In this shift, attraction changes its flavor. You are no longer magnetic because of your sweetness, your accessibility, your willingness to please. You are magnetic because of your restraint, the unspoken, the unseen, the unknowable. You embody the chiaroscuro of shadow and light, the balance of warmth and danger. You are the mystery that keeps the gaze fixed, the silence that keeps the mind restless. And this is the paradox. The less you explain, the more unforgettable you become. But this silence is not meant to wall you off from love. Quite the opposite. It refines it. It ensures that only those who can stand in the intensity of your presence will stay. Only those who can handle the abyss of your silence without demanding you fill it will be worthy of you. This is the highest filter, the sharpest boundary, and it saves you from wasting yourself on the unready, the weak, the shallow. Still, the trial is not over, because silence will not only attract the strong, it will also provoke the fragile. Some will call you cold, others will call you manipulative. They will try to wound you with accusations, to force you to explain yourself so they can feel powerful again. But here is where you must remember, their words are not mirrors of you. They are mirrors of their fear. Every insult thrown at you is proof that they cannot handle the reflection your silence forces them to see. And as you hold steady, you begin to notice something unexpected. Silence does not just keep others out, it allows you in. For the first time, you begin to hear the rhythms of your own body, the way your breath slows, the way your heartbeat steadies, the way your intuition rises. You feel the weight of a gaze not from others, but from yourself. You see the woman you are becoming, not desperate, not fragmented, not apologetic, but whole. This is where the empowerment turns radiant. Because once you see yourself clearly, no one can convince you otherwise. Once you know your worth without explanation, no silence from another can shatter you. You become the axis around which everything else turns. The world may tilt, men may falter, relationships may shift, but you remain centered, sovereign, burning. Yet there is one last danger, the danger of mistaking silence for walls, of using it not as a crown but as armor to hide behind. True silence is not withdrawal, it is not avoidance, it is not punishment, it is presence. It is the ability to stand in your truth so fully that words are unnecessary. If you confuse it for distance, you will remain untouched, but also unloved. The art is not in closing yourself off. It is in opening only to those who are worthy of the silence you hold. And when that moment comes, when someone proves themselves capable of standing in your silence without fear, without demand, without rushing you to explain, you will know. Because silence will no longer feel heavy. It will feel like home. And from that place, love can finally grow, not from desperation, not from explanation, but from the shared fire of two sovereign souls who need no justification to exist together. But before that moment arrives, you must master the fire alone. You must face the fractured mirror without flinching. Because only when you can look into your own silence and not tremble will you be ready to meet the world as Lilith reborn. And in that mirror, in the half-light of your own gaze, a question lingers like smoke. When the silence reveals the woman you truly are, will you recognize her? Recognition is the final threshold, because the woman you meet in that silence is not the one you performed into existence. She is not the girl who smiled through disappointment, not the lover who explained away neglect, not the daughter who carried invisible wounds. She is the unbroken core, the primal force that never bowed. And when her eyes lock onto yours through the fractured mirror, you will feel both terror and awe. At first, you may resist her. She does not fit the story you have told about yourself. She is too wild, too unapologetic, too dangerous. You may want to soften her edges to explain her power away. But if you dare to face her fully, you will see she is not your enemy. She is your liberation. She is the Lilith within you, waiting for centuries of silence to shatter so she could rise. This is individuation's climax, the reunion with the shadow self. The moment you no longer exile her as too much or not enough. The moment you recognize that her refusal to explain is not arrogance but alignment. Her silence is not emptiness but fullness. Her defiance is not rebellion but truth. And when you merge with her, you stop living as fragments. You become whole. From this wholeness, attraction changes again. You no longer fear abandonment because you do not abandon yourself. You no longer fear rejection because you do not reject your own fire. Men sense it immediately. The weight of your gaze, the stillness of your silence, the sovereign way you take up space. It is not something you say. It is something you are. And this being is what makes you magnetic beyond reason. Now imagine the scene. You enter the room where he once ignored you. The same man who left your texts unanswered, who let your voice trail into silence, now freezes at the sound of your heels across the floor. You say nothing. You simply exist. And yet his breath stumbles, his chest tightens, his eyes cannot leave you. It is not your explanation that holds him. It is your silence, wrapped around you like crimson silk and cold marble. This is the power that terrifies. Because words can be argued with, debated, dismissed. But presence cannot. Silence cannot. A woman who does not explain is a woman who cannot be reduced, cannot be controlled, cannot be forgotten. She becomes the echo that lingers long after the conversation ends, the image burned into memory long after she leaves the room. She becomes the story he tells himself at night when no one else is listening. But the danger of this power is also its gift. It demands responsibility. If you wield silence carelessly, it can wound. It can become cruelty, manipulation, punishment. That is not Lilith. That is fear disguised as control. True Lilith energy is not about withholding. It is about embodying. It is about knowing that your presence is already enough, that you do not need to trade explanations for validation. It is about choosing silence because it speaks louder than words, not because you are afraid to speak. And when you hold silence from this place, everything shifts. Your relationships deepen. Your boundaries solidify. Your self-respect becomes unshakable. You are no longer at the mercy of anyone's attention because you carry your own like fire in your hands. You are no longer terrified of loss because nothing essential can be taken from you. You are no longer invisible because your very silence is unforgettable. Jung said that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. That is the work silence demands. To accept yourself not as others framed you, not as the wounded child, not as the pleading lover, but as the sovereign woman who owes nothing. And once you accept her, you begin to live differently. Every step is steadier. Every gaze is heavier. Every choice is freer. The crown no longer burns, it glows. And still, there will be moments when the old patterns return. When the phone glows in the dark and your chest tightens. When the empty chair across the table reminds you of absence. When the urge to explain claws at your throat. But now, you will recognize it. You will smile at it. You will choose silence not as a prison but as liberation. Because you know the truth now. Every explanation steals your power and every silence gives it back. So the question becomes, how will you wield it? Will you carry silence like a sword, sharp and cutting? Will you carry it like a V? Isle, soft and mysterious. Will you carry it like a crown, radiant and untouchable? The choice is yours. But whatever you choose, the world will never see you the same again. Because once a woman stops explaining, she is no longer in the story others wrote for her. She is writing her own. And that story is not a story of waiting, of pleasing, of shrinking. It is a story of fire, a story of exile turned into throne, of silence turned into power. You walk through the same places you once trembled in, but now the air bends differently. The chair that once felt like abandonment now feels like sovereignty. The unanswered phone call no longer feels like rejection, it feels like release. You no longer interpret absence as proof of your unworthiness. You interpret it as proof of your freedom. And that shift changes everything. Men sense it before you even speak. Friends feel it when you enter the room. Family notices it in the way you carry yourself. You do not argue, you do not defend, you do not explain. You allow silence to speak for you. And silence says, I am not here to be understood. I am here to be undeniable. This is the dangerous truth society never wanted you to know. They told you that silence meant weakness, that your voice must constantly prove your worth, that explanation was the price of acceptance. But the opposite is true. The moment you stop explaining, you stop begging. The moment you stop defending, you stop bleeding. The moment you stop performing, you start living. And that is what terrifies them most, that you might realize you never needed their approval to begin with. The more you embody this truth, the more you understand Lilith's myth not as punishment but as prophecy. She was cast out of paradise, but she did not wither. She built her own kingdom in the shadows where no one could command her. She became the mother of her own creation, the ruler of her own world. And that is the archetype you carry when you stop explaining. The woman who builds her life from the ashes of exile, radiant in her independence, dangerous in her freedom. Picture it now. You walk into a room filled with those who once doubted you. The ones who labeled you difficult, too much, impossible to love. Their whispers hang in the air like smoke, but when you step through the doorway, the noise falls silent. You do not defend yourself. You do not explain the choices you made. You simply exist, so fully, so unapologetically, that their words shrivel in the heat of your presence. They realize, without you ever saying it, that you no longer belong to their narratives. And what of him, the man who once ignored your messages, who thought your silence was weakness? Now he cannot escape it. He checks his phone endlessly, replaying your absence like a wound he cannot close. He remembers the click of your heels, the weight of your gaze, the curve of your lips when you said nothing. He feels haunted, consumed, undone. The silence he once used against you has turned against him, and now he is the one explaining himself into the void. But you do not answer. Not because you hate, not because you wish to punish, but because you no longer need to. You have nothing to prove. Your silence is not vengeance, it is transcendence. It is the ultimate declaration that you have moved beyond his grasp. And that realization strikes him harder than any words ever could. He has lost you, not because you left, but because you rose. Yet do not mistake this for the end. This is not just a story about him. This is about you stepping into the archetypal current that has always been waiting for you. The siren's allure, the shadow queen's sovereignty, the high priestess's veil, the Lilith within. When you embody silence, you weave them all together into a presence that is irresistible, indestructible, unforgettable. And still the journey circles back, to the quiet room, to the fractured mirror, to the glow of the phone in the dark, to the silence that once felt like suffocation. Only now it feels different. It feels like possibility, like power, like the doorway into a life where you no longer need to explain because your existence speaks louder than words ever could. This is where the arc closes. You began with silence as a wound, and you end with silence as a crown. You began as the woman who begged to be understood, and you end as the woman who does not explain. The circle is complete, but the transformation is only beginning. Because now, the world is watching, and the question hanging in the air is not whether you will be heard. It is whether they are ready to hear the silence you carry. And when you walk into that final room, every eye turns. You part the air with nothing but your presence. His breath falters. Their words collapse. The silence grips them all. And then he realizes it is not what you say that undoes him. It is what you no longer bother to explain. The weight of your silence crushes harder than any accusation. The hollow spa. See where your defense used to be now rings like a cathedral, echoing with something greater than words, presence. His excuses hang lifeless in the air, but you do not reach to catch them. You let them fall, and in their shattering, you become untouchable. This is why a woman who never explains herself is dangerous, not because she is cruel, not because she plays games, but because she lives in a reality beyond permission. She does not wait for validation to crown her. She wears her sovereignty like crimson silk, brushing against cold marble floors as she moves through the world. Her gaze no longer asks, "Am I enough?" Her gaze declares, "I am inevitable." And that inevitability terrifies those who need her small, because a woman who refuses to explain is a woman who refuses to shrink. She will not kneel to soften the blow of her truth. She will not dim the fire in her chest to soothe fragile egos. She will not untangle her choices for the comfort of those who cannot understand them. She moves like shadow across the wall, like a secret never confessed, like Lilith herself returning in the night. Your silence becomes a spell not of manipulation but of magnetism. It bends the air, sharpens desire, unsettles certainty. Those who once dismissed you now hunger for what they cannot grasp. Those who once demanded answers now stumble in confusion. And you remain still, calm, untouchable. Every breath you take is a reminder your life belongs to you. Your path belongs to you. Your power belongs to you. But do not misunderstand. This silence is not passive. It is not the silence of a woman muzzled or erased. It is the silence of a storm gathering its force. It is the silence of midnight before a wildfire ignites. It is the silence of a queen seated on her throne, not needing to shout to be obeyed. This is the silence of Lilith, the silence that refuses chains, the silence that births a new world. And when you embody it, you do not merely gain confidence. You become magnetic. Your allure deepens, not because of what you reveal, but because of what you withhold. The mystery becomes your armor. The enigma becomes your weapon. He cannot stop thinking about you because you give him nothing to hold. They cannot dismiss you because you give them nothing to destroy. You become a mirror in which they see their own hunger, their own fear, their own inadequacy. This is the transformation Jung spoke of. The shadow integrated, the wound transmuted, the archetype awakened. You no longer run from the parts of yourself once called too much, too dark, too wild. You embrace them. You wear them as jewels. You let the darkness curl around you like velvet, soft yet impenetrable. And in that embrace, you step into individuation, not half of yourself, not a silenced self, but the whole. Now return one last time to that room, the phone glowing in the dark, the fractured mirror, the empty chair. Once these were symbols of your shame, your invisibility, your desperation. Now they are relics. The phone glows, but you do not wait. The mirror fractures, but you see yourself whole. The chair stands empty, but you sit upon a throne no one can take. The silence no longer swallows you. You are the silence. And so, the circle completes. The wound that began with silence becomes the crown of silence. The pain that once hollowed you becomes the fire that fills you. The archetype you feared becomes the archetype you embody. You are no longer the woman who begged to be explained. You are the woman who never explains. And that is the dangerous truth. For when you stop explaining, you stop belonging to anyone else's story. You become the author of your own. You walk through the world with a power that cannot be debated, cannot be diminished, cannot be denied. You are Lilith in modern form, untamed, unapologetic, unforgettable. And when you stand in your silence, the world itself leans in to listen.